Part 2, Chapter 16, The Creative Power of Thought, or Hegel's Philosophy as a Medicine. It is a doctrine clearly taught in the Scriptures, especially in the first chapter of the Johannine Gospel, that the world was created by the Logos, or the divine thought. John 1 verse 3. It is also certain that it is revealed only to thought. What we call sensation arises from within, though at first glance it might seem otherwise. Before we have a perception of an external object, we have an antecedent thought or image of it, without which the sensation could not exist. The eyes may be open and directed towards an object, and yet we do not see it, unless the attention, that is, the thought, is fixed upon it. Without this, the world would be to us a blank, an empty void. Ideas may exist antecedently to thought, as these are the thoughts of the divine mind. Hegel, the philosopher par excellence of Germany, says, "We have mental pictures of objects before we think them, and it is only through these mental pictures, and by having constant recourse to them, that the mind goes on to know and comprehend in the strict meaning of thought." The prevalent materialistic systems of philosophy affirm that thought arises from sensation and is suggested by it. But this is only an apparent truth. The idealists teach that no sensation, whether of sight, hearing, feeling, taste, or smell, is possible except it is preceded or accompanied by thought. On this subject, Fichte observes, "The whole outward sense and all its objects are founded upon universal thought, and a sensible perception is possible only in thought, and as something thought, as a determination of the general consciousness, but by no means in itself and separate from consciousness." Even Sir William Hamilton affirms the same when he lays it down as a fundamental truth that without attention there is no consciousness, and that attention is to consciousness what the contraction of the pupil is to the eye. It was the fundamental idea of Schilling's philosophy that the subject and object are identical, or in other words, that the thought of a thing and the thing itself are not distinguishable, but are in their inmost reality one and the same, and can never be separated. Hegel has unfolded the doctrine of John into a systematic statement. His logic, a word derived from logos, may properly be characterized as the philosophy of thought. To him, as Sterling in his Secret of Hegel has said, "Whatever is thought." In his system, thought is the inwardness, or as it were the kernel of the world. This is only another way of expressing the doctrine of Berkeley. Hegel calls nature the system of unconscious thought, or, to use the expression of Schelling, a fossilized intelligence. Thought forms the indwelling nature or substance of external things. It is also the universal substance, the groundwork, of all that is spiritual. In all human perception, thought is present. So thought is the universal in all acts of conception and recollection. In short, in every mental activity, in willing, wishing, and the like. All these faculties are only additional specifications of thought. When it is presented in this light, thought has a different part to play from what it has when we speak of a faculty of thought, one among a crowd of other faculties, such as conception, perception, and will, with which it stands on the same level. When it is seen to be the true universal of all that nature and mind contain, it extends so as to embrace all these faculties and becomes the basis of everything. This is the secret of Hegel, to possess which, according to his disciples, was to hold the key to the profoundest knowledge and have the means of the highest happiness. It takes us to the ultima thule, the utmost boundary of all that the mind can know. In his system, thought is not a mere mental faculty. It is the very substance, the basis of the mind, and that which is universally present in every mental act and state. To think is a necessary condition of our existence, and of the existence, or at least, the manifestation to our consciousness of everything in the universe. To cease thinking is all the same as a termination of our individual existence. It is a suspension of our being. It is equivalent to an annihilation both of ourselves and of everything else, or, as the German philosophy would express it, the ego and the non-ego. Thoughts are things. This is evident from language. Thing is but another form of think. The words are the same at the root. A thing is that which has existence to our minds by being the object of thought. In their inmost reality, things are objective thoughts. Creation, or what we call nature, is a permanent manifestation of the thoughts of God, and we perceive an outward world only so far as we think in concert with Him. All that we know of a tree or a flower, or can think of them, measures the extent of our vision of them. As one has said, in the world of man and nature, we have simply to do with the thought of God. We cannot suppose that God made the world as a carpenter does a house. It is sufficient that God think the world. Hence, the universe is an expression, a manifestation, an ultimation of the ideas of the divine mind. As we live in God, so we think in and from Him. We are not sufficient of ourselves to think anything as of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God. Hegel's doctrine is not pantheism but more properly panlogism, or that which is taught by John, the intimate disciple of the Christ, that all things are created by the Logos, which means the divine thought. Thought is the groundwork of all reality. It is that universal principle that underlies all existence. Take away the thought of a thing, and it is to us annihilated. It becomes as nothing. It is a fundamental and intuitive truth that what is out of thought is to us out of existence. When we do not think of a thing, it is all the same as if it were not. This is as self-evidently certain as any of the axioms of geometry. Existence is manifested being, and an entity of which we have no conception, no idea, no thought, neither has nor can have any existence to us for the time being. When we think of it, we again, as it were, create it or give it reality. If there were no mind to perceive, as Berkeley maintained, there would be no universe, for all things are created by and revealed only to thought. Forgetfulness of a thing, a putting it out of mind, a banishing it from thought, is to us its annihilation. If it has being, it has no existence, or standing out, as the word signifies. The celebrated philosopher Immanuel Kant was able by the strength of thought to forget the pains of gout. It required, Ho says, a great mental effort, but never failed to afford relief. When John affirms of the Logos that all things were made by it, and without it was not anything made that was made, John I, 3, he means that thought is the active principle of creation, for a word, divine or human, is in its essence only a thought. Is the philosophy of Hegel of any practical value? Can it be made available in constructing an efficient system of phrenopathy or mental cure? Spirit is the substance or underlying reality of matter, and thought is the creative power of the mind. We have shown in a preceding chapter that all we know, or can know, of a material world and of the human body is in ourselves. Their externality is only apparent, not real. The same is equally true of disease. Taking thought, as was done by Descartes, to be all that of which we are conscious, one may safely affirm that disease is only in the mind, that is, in our thought. One thing is certain, being confirmed by our experience, that a pain, if it is not thought of, is not felt. It is thus made a nihility, a nothingness. For we repeat, that which is not in thought has to us no existence. When we think of it, it passes from nothing to something, for it is only by this that it comes to have any reality to us. Disease without this would he is nothing, for it is only a wrong way of thinking, or, if you prefer it, a false belief. Banish it from thought, and it no longer exists. Just to the extent in which this is done, it is annihilated. As long as this is done, the mind triumphs over it, and it is cured. Here is the grand remedy, the long-sought panacea. It is a fundamental principle in the mental method of cure. Grasp the idea in all its fullness, and you have a remedy as certain as anything can be, an infallible and universal specific. On the effect of thought upon sensation, Dr. Carpenter remarks, the acuteness with which particular sensations are felt is influenced in a remarkable degree by the attention they receive from the mind. If the mind be entirely inactive, as in profound sleep, no sensation whatever is produced by ordinary impressions. And the same is the case when the attention is so completely concentrated upon some object of thought or contemplation that sensations altogether unconnected with it fail to make any impression upon the perceptive consciousness. On the other hand, when the attention from any cause is strongly directed upon them, impressions, very feeble in themselves, produce sensations of, even painful acuteness. Thus, everyone knows how much a slight itching of some part of the surface may be magnified by the direction of the thoughts to it, whilst, as soon as they are forced by some stronger impression into another channel, the irritation is no longer felt. The most important inquiry in relation to this mental mode of cure remains to be considered. How can we get disease out of our thought? If this cannot be done, the system, although theoretically true, is of no practical value. It is said, in objection to the view given above, that as long as one feels a pain, he cannot avoid thinking of it. There is a show of truth in this assertion, but it is equally certain that as long as we think of it, we shall feel it, and if by any means we can get our thoughts away from it, so that it is utterly out of thought, we no longer feel it. Here is a contest between feeling and thought. Which has the right of dominion? Which one shall govern and control the other? It is a well-established principle in mental science that our thoughts are under the control of our volitions, but the feelings and emotions are not so. There is a self-determining power of thought, which we call free will. We can change the direction of our thoughts as readily as a sailor can alter the course of his vessel by varying the position of the helm. But in the mind, the department of the feelings lies beyond the direct action of the will. These cannot be changed or suppressed by any direct volitional effort, but only mediately through the thoughts. If I am in pain, or unhappy, or diseased, it is possible for me, at least, to think of something else, and in proportion as this is done, relief is gained. Invalids are often recommended to travel, and they gain great advantage to themselves by so doing, because, by seeing and thinking of so many other things, the attention is diverted from themselves. But why should this have any therapeutic value if their thoughts have nothing to do with the inception and progress of their malady? In proportion as their disease and their trouble are out of thought, they become non-existent. A chronic disease being a fixedness of thought, a morbid steadfastness of a false idea. In this condition, a new idea, a radical change in the mode of thinking has great remedial efficacy. It may fall as silently upon the soul of the sufferer as the dew upon a fading flower, but has the vivifying power of the archangel's trump to raise the dead, for ideas are the only things that really live. It may be considered as an established principle, a demonstrated truth, that we can change the direction of our thoughts. We can think of something besides the pain or the disease. This, if not a cure, is a relief. But we can go a step further than this and institute a fine of thought that runs counter to the disease, and will neutralize it with as much scientific certainty as an acid coming in contact with an alkali will change it to something else. Some of the most deadly poisons can be rendered harmless by the chemical action of an antidote. They are commuted at once into an innoxious substance, a harmless compound. So it comes within the compass of the powers of our minds, when in pain and disease, to think that we shall recover. Such a thing is manifestly conceivable. We can think this as easily as we can say it, for we could not say it even as a repetition of the words of another unless it was first a thought in the mind. We can also think that we now are getting well, that a cure is inaugurated, and that the pain, or the disease, or the unhappiness is passing away. It is quite possible and practicable to think this, and if we continue this quasi-belief, we shall soon in a degree begin to feel it, and it becomes so far a reality, for it is only thought that gives a real existence to anything in the universe. The feeling added to the thought makes it an act of faith, for faith is not a mere intellectual belief, but a feeling that a thing is true, and thus, according to Paul, it becomes the substance of things hoped for, the evidence, the convincing proof of things not seen. All the operations or modifications of mind are reducible to thought and feeling. Thought and feeling are the essence of the soul, and the sum and substance of all mental activity and soul life. They include and bound our very existence. Without them we should be as nothing. If I subtract them from what I call myself, my individual being, there is no remainder. When these are arrayed against disease, my very being is in antagonism to it, and the malady is withered at the root. Here is the antidote to that abnormality of mind, that morbid thinking, that is the cause of disease. If our mental force has become weakened, and the mind has become fixed in its action in a wrong direction, and in our unaided strength we are not adequate to the instituting of the proper line of thought and feeling, we may receive help from others. Here is the highest office, the divinest function of the physician. Unless he can by some means inaugurate a new mode of thinking and feeling, with which the disease cannot coexist, he is of no use. Faith makes us whole now as it did in the days of Jesus the Christ, for the reason that it is inconsistent with the mental state that underlies the disease and supplants it. It is a spiritual medicine, having the nature of an infallible antidote. It is a new mode of thinking and feeling that comes in to overpower the morbid mental state, which is the original cause of the malady. The influence of thought in the inception of disease, and in its cure, is unconsciously and instinctively recognized in common parlance. It is often said of an invalid that he is well if he only thought so, and after recovery the remark is frequently made that he could have recovered sooner if he had sooner come to think so. This is true, though its expression is often tainted with a lack of charity. To change the morbid thinking is precisely where the difficulty in the cure lies. He who would assist the invalid to rise out of that material range of thought and sense-bound state of mind that are the ground of the disease must not address himself or his remedies merely to the body of the patient, for that is adding weight to the millstone that is already drawing him down. He must be taught to forget the body and become spirit. The body is, in itself, lifeless, motionless, and sensationless. It has neither thought, intelligence, nor feeling. All these are in the soul. To perceive this is a long step towards recovery. What we call the physical organism is the most unreal part of human nature. This must become to us an ineffaceable conviction, and be so inwrought into our very being as to change our mode of thinking, feeling, speaking, and acting. In addressing the invalid, the body should be ignored, and we should speak as a soul, and from the soul, to the soul of the patient or sufferer. We then speak from the divine realm of causation, and have a power over disease that cannot be gained by occupying any other standing ground. The man who is bound with the iron fetters of sense, and is in the underground dungeon of materialism, can afford but small aid to another in the same condition with himself. To possess the divinely ordained power of mind over matter, and of soul over body, he must be himself unshackled and born into the true liberty of the spirit. He must be elevated above that range of thought and plane of cognition that are limited to a mere sensuous seeming and the appearance of truth to the discernment of the spiritual reality of things. Much that passes current for science is only the semblance of truth and not a spiritual intelligence. This is a divine healing force, the power of God and the wisdom of God unto salvation. It constitutes in us a point of attachment between the soul and the creative thought, and repairs the broken link which has disjoined us from God. The utterances of such a person will be the echo of God's ideas, and have the authority of divine oracles. His mind vibrates in harmony with the infinite mind, and his thoughts become one with the power that created and upholds the world, and is perpetually exhibited in nature's laws. The spiritual physician, or he who heals the body by touching the springs of life in the soul of the patient, should speak and act from the divine realm of his being, as did Jesus the Christ. The words that I speak unto you I speak not of myself, but the Father that dwelleth in me, doeth the works. Man is the highest manifestation of God in the universe, in a broader and more comprehensive sense than the Church has ever recognized. God is manifested in the flesh. We have being in him. He has existence in us. Paul affirms that what may be known of God is manifested in man, which implies that outside of ourselves we have, and can have, no knowledge of God. To find God there, and identify our life with his life, is to be invested with a power over disease like that which was exhibited by the Christ. The same language might be used in relation to the Christ. What is meant by that term in the Christian system is not the Jesus of history, the mere son of Joseph and Mary, who has ever been the object of worship in the Christian Church. This has been the great mistake of the religious world. The real Christ is to be sought within, where alone he can be found. He represents and personifies the principle of spiritual life and intelligence, and is identical with it. In harmony with this view, Paul speaks of the sublime mystery, or arcane doctrine, of Christianity as being that of Christ in you, the hope of glory. And in the deepest prayer ever uttered by the lips of man, Jesus, as the Christ says of his disciples or scholars of every age, I in them, and thou in me, that they may be made perfect or complete in one. For, as a principle of spiritual intelligence, his life may he mingled and blended with ours into a unity. Of this Paul speaks when he says, It is no more I that live, but Christ liveth in me. In this state of the soul, the powers of the individual man, the personal ego, become augmented and reinforced, like the addition of an ocean to a drop of water. In union with the Christ, when thus viewed, we come into a fellowship or community of life with the collective man, and with all the fullness of the Godhead, are complete in him who is the head of all principality and power.